Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's Journal for All Seasons. I've gone ahead and drawn a grid because I wanted to do something grid-like. Sorry. Last week we did the 9 patch with the leaves that we cut into squares, and I was thinking about grids and 9 patches, and I was thinking about when some years ago I had a friend who I've lost touch with her now unfortunately, but she was really big into Sudoku. She'd been an accountant before she retired and she was, you know, a real number person, and she got me interested in Sudoku, and I still do it sometimes, and I'll talk a little bit as I'm going along about why I do it and so on. But anyway, she wasn't a quilter or a stitcher or anything of that kind, and I made her a quilt of 9 patches, and I laid the colours out in a Sudoku grid. If you don't know what Sudoku is, you have 9 by 9, a grid of 9 by 9, and then within each square there's another grid of 9, and then you have to fill in the numbers from 1 to 9, so that every box only has the numbers from 1 to 9, and every row going this way and every row going that way also only has the numbers from 1 to 9. I'm sure you all know, but you know, just thought I'd say it anyway. So I made her this lap quilt with 9 patches with 9 different colours, which I laid out. You know, I assigned each colour a number in the Sudoku grid and then laid them out accordingly. And I gave it to her, and I didn't tell her what it was, but at that point I was free motion quilting, and I put quite a wide border around it, and in the border when I was doing my free motion quilting, my, you know, wibbling about generally, every now and then I wrote the word Sudoku, and it was some time before she worked it out. But anyway, so that was that quilt for her. And I've also made Joey a blanket using Tunisian crochet squares in a Sudoku grid. So if you've not heard of that or seen that, it's a nice way to get a random layout. So I thought, because I've been thinking over the couple of years that I've been doing YouTube, of doing a Sudoku quilt or something of one way or another with you, but I'm not sure I'll ever get round to it, to be completely honest. So I thought if I do it here in the journal with paper as a grid, if you know how to sew 2 bits of fabric together, which I'm sure many of you do because you're here with me, you can translate it into a Sudoku quilt if you have such an idea, or a wall hanging or a cushion or whatever size you like. So that was my thinking. Yeah, so let's get on with it, and then I'll talk about why I do Sudoku as we go along. So I've drawn a grid of 9 squares. My grid is about 6.5 inches, just to fit in my journal, I think. About 6.5 inches square, and I've done a little 1/4 inch border in between to separate the 9s. And I thought of drawing, you know, the 9 within the 9, so to speak, but I don't think I'm going to bother because I don't mind if it's wonky, and I may well rub these pencil lines out afterwards. I've done them a bit darker than I normally would, just so you can see them. I think I'm just going to cut the squares and put them, you know, in wonky. So I've got my blunties for cutting paper, excuse me, and I've done a Sudoku grid. Now I do it on my ancient tablet, which my friend Chrissy keeps trying to make me get a new one, but it still works. So I think it is, I've got a feeling it's about 12 or 13 years old, which for tech is quite old, but you know me, I don't like to throw things away. But one of the few things I do on it, I only use it if I need to type a big document, or I use it to check your messages sometimes and things like that, but otherwise I just use my phone. Anyway, but I do use it for Sudoku. So here is a grid that, rather than showing you my glary tablet, I did one this morning, and I've written the numbers onto this bit of paper as a template for me. So if you don't do Sudoku and you don't want to do a Sudoku, I guess you could Google. I expect you can find a completed Sudoku grid online, but otherwise if I just leave that there for a minute, you can screenshot it, or, you know, pause and write it all down, or do whatever you like. So you will see that there's numbers from 1 to 9 in every box, and you know, they become, when the colours are ascribed to them, they'll follow that pattern. So then the other thing that you'll need is 9 little squares of coloured paper. So I'll just set that aside now, I hope you've seen enough of it. So So I've got 9 pieces from magazines, just from my, filing system. And I've tried to choose, some of them have got texture in, but I've tried to choose them so that when they're cut down into little squares, which will probably be about 3/4 of an inch, or even only half an inch, all 9 will be enough the same to make the pattern. I mean, if you wanted to stick with plain colours, like this is a bit of sky from a magazine picture, then, that's ideal, I guess. But I thought it might also be nice to have some textured pieces, and they'll look the same enough. Hope that makes sense when they're down into little squares. So I think I've got 10 here actually. Let's just have a look. I think I did one for luck. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I've got 10. So I need to get rid of one. I don't know which one to get rid of now. Right, tell me. You'll all be saying different ones. I'm actually finding that blue is quite standy outy. Those are a bit similar, but I don't know now. Yeah, I think I prefer it without the bright blue. And I won't mind that those are similar. So the biggest challenge for doing this is keeping things in order. Now I'm a librarian, I've got that kind of brain. I like organising things. When I did the quilt, I cut out the 9 squares of each colour, so you end up with 81 squares in total, and pinned them together with the number on them that they were, so number 9, number 1, whatever, and then just kept them in stacks and then laid them out each grid as I went along. I can't really pin tiny bits of paper together, so what I might do is just lay them out. I'm just thinking on my feet here. I might, right, so I've got this bit of paper. It's not ideal because it has got lines on, but I couldn't be bothered to get off my bottom and go into the other room. I think I'm just going to do it like that. And then do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then just put them in little stacks on their number and hope I don't sneeze or Fred doesn't come and get involved or anything like that. Once I've got one grid down, I can refer back to, see which number goes with which. You'll either love this or you'll hate it. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to watch me do it if you don't want to. So I'm going to put this up here, probably where you can't see it. And as I cut my little squares, I'm going to just put them onto a number. So let's start with this one. Now you want the square that you cut your little squares from to be slightly smaller than your grid, just so you've got a bit of room in between them. So I'm going to use this, which is already quite small, and I'm just going to trim it down and then use it as a template to cut the others. I'm going to go, and I'm not bothered about wonky. If you want to be all super precise and measury, you do you as always. Okay, it's maybe another slither off there, and I know it's sliver. Talked about it before. My family, we always said slither for sliver. There we go. So I'm not going to subdivide that yet. I'm going to use that as a template to cut out my other square. So I'm just going to hold it on there like that, and I'm going to, whoops, try and hold it still, Catherine. And then all the little bits I cut off will go in my collage box. Yeah, we're doing self-care journaling here, so you might say, what's Sudoku got to do with self-care journaling? Well, I think quite a lot. Just a brief sidebar, as Jerry would say. Sorry, trying to do Jerry's accent and failing dismally. Jerry Bellini. When you use something as when you make a template out of a thing, whether it's cloth or paper that you're going to use, you say, well, this is my template. Keep using that as the template. Don't use that to cut that one and then use that to cut the next one, and so on. Because if you have a tiny discrepancy when you cut the yellow one in this case, and then you go and cut the pink one and you have another discrepancy, by the time you've cut however many, it might be a big difference. Whereas if you keep using the original one, the worst you'll have is a tiny discrepancy in each one. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go for a bit of pink in this. I'm going to keep away from that other part of it. I don't know if you can hear that noise, but that is a bird on the roof. They do sound quite loud. I wondered what it was the first time I heard it when I first lived here. Anyway, I was talking about why I do Sudoku. It sounds like it's, you know, an ostrich or something. It's not, it's probably a pigeon at the most, at the largest. Yeah, I started doing Sudoku, like I said, because of my friend Joe doing it. And I don't know in other countries, but here they're often in magazines or, you know, newspapers. They have a section of puzzles to do. I don't buy print magazines anymore, but I do certainly remember them being in those. And you can buy books of them. But these days, like I said, I used to buy books, but these days I do them on my tablet. And there you can get all kinds of apps. And I used to do just the one where you fill in the numbers, and you're given a grid and you can choose, I'm sure you know all this, you can choose how difficult you want it to be, and you know, so on. The one I do now is quite interesting, if you like that kind of thing. It's called Killer Sudoku. And rather than just working out the numbers from the numbers you've already got, some of the squares are kind of linked together with a dotted line, and then there's a tiny number in the corner, and you have to do the numbers that add up to make that number. So you might have two squares bracketed together and the number 7 in one of the corners. Does that make sense? So then those two squares must be numbers that add up to 7, so 1 and 6, 2 and 5, or 3 and 4, for example. So it makes it in some ways more complex, but in other ways easier, because you've got that extra clue. But I now do one with no numbers given at all. I do it's called Expert. Check me out, I'm an expert in Sudoku. Good to be an expert in something. And I find that quite challenging, and it really engages my brain. Now, back in the dark days, or the darker days, when I was first alone here, I found that when I couldn't read and I couldn't concentrate on a podcast, you know, my brain was whirring with all the stuff, and still now sometimes, you know, that doing a Sudoku, for me personally, I can only speak for myself, requires just the right amount of concentration to engage my brain without, you know, tiring me out. And it distracts me from whatever it is that I'm thinking about if I feel I need to be distracted. Sometimes I let the thoughts run, you know, I do all different things. I'm sure you're maybe the same. Sometimes I just let my brain off the leash, kind of thing. But other times, if I find I'm kind of going round and round in circles on the same thing and not getting anywhere, or if I'm upset by something, then I just find doing Sudoku, for me, you know, when I can't stitch or knit or crochet because my brain's still working, and even if I'm reading a book, you know, that it's just, I think it's just a different kind of concentration, and I just find that doing a Sudoku or two is really helpful. So that's why I do Sudoku. I don't think I've talked about it before, but that's why I think it is part of self-care. And you'll have to let me know if you're a Sudokuer. Is that the word for people that do Sudoku? Someone who does Sudoku. There's all different ones these days, I'm sure. I just came across this one with where you have to do the sums as well, and I just really like it. And I also have found, I think my mental arithmetic used to be quite good because I worked in a pub when I was younger, back in the day before we had computerised tills, and so you had to be able to add up. And I also worked in a fish and chip shop. I used to joke that I knew my 17 times table, because back then a portion of chips was 17 pence. You can't get a portion of chips for 17 pence now. And, you know, having to do that mental arithmetic in a busy chippy, as we call a fish and chip shop, or a busy pub, is good for your brain as well. But, you know, I don't really do much of that these days, mental arithmetic, very much. When I was a quilter, the maths was, when I was, you know, making quilts that were more precise, and you had to cut so many this and so many that, and calculate. When I was designing my own quilts rather than just following patterns, it was, you know, that was good for my brain as well. And, you know, finally Pythagoras had a reason. I use Pythagoras quite a lot, and things like that. Just putting these bits out of the way. But yeah, I don't do that now, but I found that since doing this particular kind of Sudoku that my mental arithmetic has improved again, you know. Like, what numbers go together to make 7? I just rattled them off. That's because of doing Sudoku. I wouldn't have been able to do that before. Okay, so I've got my 9 colours, and I think they look lovely just like that, but we're going to go for making them even smaller. Now again, if you want to cut these, you know, accurately and measure, obviously we need to cut this into 9, so you can't just do it in half or fold it or do anything like that. So I'm just going to eyeball it basically. So I'm going to put each one on my this, like this. I'll put it there. I'm just going to, it doesn't matter because they're all going to get mixed up. I know you can't now see the number, but I know it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like, you know, so and so on. And now you can all watch me like a hawk if you feel so inclined, and shout if I make a mistake, and I won't notice till I edit. But anyway, right. So how are we going to do this? I think I am going to just cut them all up first. They're going to go everywhere, aren't they? I'm just going to cut them all up. So I'm just going to cut this into 3 strips. I'll do one with you, and then I'll probably go and do it off camera. See, that's now not remotely even, but we're not bothered. If we were really bothered, we could then cut that down, but then all the others would be off, so we're not going to bother. We're just going to... I've already fired one across the table. Now I can't pick it up. That's really rectangular. Some of these might end up being trimmed. I haven't really thought this through, can you tell? Well, you know, I did it in cloth, like I said, but I haven't really thought through how to do it in paper. Let's just... Now you see I have to measure now. That's centimetres, they make no sense to me. 1.5, so they need to be about 1/2 inch, which is about there. Let's see if we can do better with this one. No, we didn't really. Don't do this if you like everything to be super accurate and you don't want to spend the rest of the day measuring and fiddling about, because you won't enjoy it. Only do this if, like me, you don't mind if it's all wonky and you just see it as an exercise in, I don't know what. I don't know what it's an exercise in. An exercise in fun. Not everything has to have a reason, does it? It's also a part of self-care. Just getting a bee in your bonnet and going with it. And I'm now learning that I need to cut this first strip a little more narrow than I thought. Yeah, I think, see, she can be taught. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing these, and then I'll be back for the stick. Cut them all out. I'm really trying not to breathe on them now. I've got my hand in front of my mouth, I hope you can hear me. And I've moved them just to the side, as you can see, so I can see the numbers. So I'm going to carefully move them over there. And I've got my grid here, and I'm just going to use glue stick. So I'm going to start with my first grid. And you can either, this is where you might just examine a little bit your process and what makes you happy. If this speaks to you at all, or you just think it's way too fiddly and silly, then like I say, don't do it. So you could either lay them out in order and then stick them, or you can get a number 4 and stick it, get a number 1 and stick it. So I think I'm going to start with taking them one at a time, because I think if I lay them all out, I'll move them and they'll blow away and I don't know what else. So I'm working on this top left hand grid to start with. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it, but I'll just put it to one side. So I'll say the numbers as I get them, like bingo. Right, so I'm going to take a number 4. I don't know all the words, but there's words for all the numbers in bingo, isn't there? I know 2 is a little duck because it looks like a little duck. Do you have that in other countries with bingo? I used to play bingo at Christmas when I was a little girl. So that one needs to go up there. Number 4. Next is number 1. I'm going to get super sticky. I'm just going to space them by eye, like I said. It's not really about making a pretty picture. It's number 5 next. It's just about the process. And one. This glue has gone a bit funny. Yeah, we used to play bingo at Christmas, and I used to know, because my Auntie Lily was always the kind of organiser of the games, and I used to always help her when I was a little girl, and she knew all the, because she went to bingo, so she knew all the things that you had to say, you know, for the numbers. I'm now trying to think of even one apart from, 22 is 2 little ducks, but I already said 2 was a duck, sorry, that's now sticking to my finger. So that's number 7, so now I need number 6. A check at the end will be that you've used all the squares and only used, you know, all the squares have been used up. If you get to the end and you've got 2 of one and none of another, then you know you've made a mistake somewhere. Number 3 is this pink, and it takes away that whole, you know, if you were doing scrappy, that desire to start, random is the hardest thing to do, isn't it, as a human being. We don't like random, we like pattern. And so if you try and do random, there's, you know, I'm talking about making a quilt or something. Number 9. It's really hard to do. I remember making the children string quilts. We did it, didn't we? We did it in, if you did the slow stitch journal with me last year. One of the weeks we put strips in a bag and pulled them out without looking. And I think I showed you a photo of Joey holding his string quilt when he was a little boy. And I made those bags, I made those quilts, that lap quilt for Joey, but I pre-cut or tore, probably cut in those days, all the strips. And then he handed them to me as I was sitting at my sewing machine, sewing all the string quilt is just made of lots of strips. In a certain configuration. I did it on an angle, on a 45-degree angle. So, you know, I had a little, what was he, 5 or 6 at the time probably, just giving me strips, and even though sometimes I go, oh, I can't put that colour next to that colour, that'll be awful, I just did it, you know. And the overall look, by the time you get so many different strips together, is pleasing. So if you wanted to do a random layout and you wanted to go to a lot of trouble, you could do it based on Sudoku. So that's my first one. So now I'm going to do the next one, obviously. Maybe not, I could have gone that way, I'm going that way. So now I need number 7, and I just keep doing it and wittering on. And if I think it's getting boring, I'll just stop wittering and then edit it out later. But yeah, so I was just thinking that maybe this is a way, if you wanted to do random, that you could, you know, for a bit of fun, if you thought it was fun. But it won't be random, there will be order to it because of that, you know, the way the numbers are worked out. If each colour is given a number. So I do think that is kind of cool, really. Whoops, I got 2. And you know, I don't know if you've got time now before Christmas, if you celebrate the holidays and you've got friends who do Sudoku, you could make them a quick cushion cover. Pay attention, Catherine. What I'm going to do is, oops, sorry for the big noise, I'm going to put a line through that to show that I've done it. So I mean I should be able to keep track, but you know, when I'm talking to you at the same time. Number 2. So yeah, so you will see when the whole thing is done, for example, if you can work these kinds of things out, that for example the bright yellow, which is quite dominant, is in a different place in each square. Number 4. So there is a there is a pattern to it, but it's, you know, quite hard to see pattern, I think. And it's, yeah, it feels like the mosaics that we've been doing, so that's why it sort of was on theme, I thought. And I often now do a Sudoku first thing in the morning when have my cup of tea before I start reading your messages, or I take my cup of tea back to bed usually. My first cup of tea of the day. And I often then will open my tablet and have a look at your messages. But sometimes before I do that, I just do a Sudoku, just while I'm having my tea. I don't know, it's just a little ritual I have. I don't tend to read in the mornings in bed, I read in bed at night. Oops. Yeah, it's just a thing. I don't know that I've ever mentioned it before, but there we go. Right, number 1. So, yeah, I do think this is going to take me a little while, and it's not going to be very interesting to watch, so I think I am going to go on and I'm going to trim that one. You see that one's touching that, so I am going to trim a bit off and get the blunties all gluey. Will it still stick? Yes. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and finish. The bird on the roof, it sounds like he's banging his beak against the roof now. I'm going to go ahead and finish it all, and then I'll be back at the end and just to finish off the page with you, okay? So I won't be no time at all for you. There we go. I think that looks quite cool. In the end, I just stamped the word Sudoku down at the bottom with my little stampy stamper. I did my best to rub out my pencil lines, but because I'd done them a bit dark, I couldn't do it very well, so I gave up. But yeah, I really like the way that looks, and like I said, if you focus on one of the colours, then you do see that it's in a different position in each of the 9 squares when you've done it correctly. So I hope you enjoy that if you have a go. Otherwise, I'm now looking at that yellow. I'm wondering why it's not in the middle. I've made a mistake, look. How have I made a mistake? I've made a mistake on my grid. I must have made a mistake when I was writing it down. Look, 2 there and 2 there. There was no yellow in the middle. Oh well, there we go. It's now called Spot the Deliberate Mistake. In fact, I'm going to write that on there. I'm going to go with that in brackets underneath, or spot the deliberate. It wasn't deliberate. I just think it's funny. Mistake. It must have been when I was copying it from my tablet for some reason. I don't know, because it can't be wrong on my tablet. Okay, I've just opened my tablet and here is the grid that I used. And you'll see that there's one number missing in the centre left square, so that it doesn't, you know, do the woohoo. But you will see that indeed the number 2 is in those 2 squares in the same position, and nowhere is it in the centre. So there we go. I don't know if if it's always like that. It's interesting, to me at least. But I just thought I'd show you, so I didn't make a mistake. I copied it exactly as it was. So there we go, back to the video. It's not possible. Anyway, there we go. Well, you weren't all shouting at me because you've only just seen it. Let's look at the pink one. So that's in every position, I think. Yeah. Anyway, apart from that, which we'll gloss over. But if those 2 are wrong, there must be another 2 wrong at least as well. Anyway. My brain can't work that out. I don't know if it's still open on my... The trouble is, on my tablet, once you've finished, it does all the, you know, yay for you kind of thing, and the grid goes away. So I left it with 1 number missing so that I could transcribe it onto my bit of paper. But anyway, I'm not making excuses for myself. Have fun with doing Sudoku wrong or right, whichever is up to you. I did look at what Sudoku means because I didn't know, and it comes from, it's Japanese. I'm sure you all knew that already, but it means single number. And it's a shortened version of a phrase in Japanese that means each single number's only once in each box or something like that. Anyway, okay. Oh, I was so organised and then it all went wrong. Anyway, never mind. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have fun with it at least, and lots of love and kisses. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth, journaling, whatever kinds of tales. See you soon. Bye bye.